Good evening, everybody. It's Dr. Malika. This is September the 12th, 2017, and it's Transformation Tuesday. So, welcome, everyone. I hope so far that your week is going well. As I publicized on my social media accounts earlier today, we will be talking about healing your inner child and dealing with issues that we've experienced as children, whether they be trauma, whether it be neglect, whether it be just situations that we didn't quite understand as children that shaped who we developed into. The reason why I thought this was important, and it's something that I continually have conversations with people about, whether it be on a personal level or in a professional setting, whether it be with students, no matter what it is, we talk about how our childhood experiences affect our emotional development, it affects our behavior patterns, and the different things that we develop into as an adult. And even though we grow up and our bodies get bigger and we even have the ability to hold down jobs and be responsible for children and even do the basic things that we consider part of being an adult, that does not necessarily mean that that child inside of us has grown up or overcome the challenges that it experienced in childhood. And so this is something that I could talk about for several weeks. I want to just start with a very basic way of looking at this and approaching it from the aspect of looking at the grief or the loss that that child would have gone through emotionally because of the experiences it went through. We often talk about with grieving when you lose a loved one when they pass away. We talk about the 5 stages of grief and going through those stages and what that looks like. And the fact that even with those stages, there's a pattern doesn't necessarily mean that you'll go through every stage. Some stages you will be stuck in. Sometimes you'll go back to a previous stage. We know that there's a process to the grieving process. And so I want to kind of talk about some steps that you have to go through and address if you're a person that experienced some things that were traumatic, were, impactful as a child that you're still dealing with as an adult. The first thing we have to look at is trust. For a wounded inner child, for a person that experienced things when they were a child that were life altering, one of the biggest things that you lose in that experience is trust. Just looking at the development stages psychologically that we go through, if we were to use Eric Erickson's model, which is a psychosocial development model, his first stage in his development theory is that we learn how to either trust or mistrust people. And so, one of the biggest things you lose if you were a child who was abused or neglected, or you just didn't get the nurturing and the bonding that you needed for you to develop in a healthy manner, emotionally or physically, is you lose the ability to trust people. And so, that is one of the things that needs to be healed. You need to be able to learn how to get past your trust issues. Some of you are probably listening to me saying this and you're saying, yes, that's me. That's one of the biggest issues I have, is that I have a hard time trusting people. And you wonder, why are you like that? It's because of the experiences you went through as a child. You did not have the ability to develop proper bonds, proper ways of trusting people, proper ways of knowing that people were going to be there for you. And that's a big deal. The reason why Erickson looks at this as the first thing we learn as far as the virtues emotionally and psychologically that help us develop into healthy people is the ability to trust people is a big deal. And so you're going to have to look at your trust issues, which means you're going to have to revisit the different things that happen to you, and you're going to have to start sifting through that in order to get to the root of what caused the source of the cause of the trust issues, whether it was with a mother, a father, a grandparent, a caregiver outside of the household that broke that bond, whether it was a traumatic experience that you went through and did not want to deal with or still are not dealing with it. Trust is a very big thing. And if you want to heal your inner child, the first step you have to deal with is dealing with trust. That inner part of you that wants to be healed has to know that it can trust to come out, it can trust to speak its heart, it can trust to confide in the hurts that it's still carrying, and know that that information is not going to be violated, that information is not going to be judged, even by yourself. You think, okay, You're saying, I'm confiding in people. And this is not just about confiding in people. This is about you having the ability to be that source for that inner part of you that will not judge those experiences, that will allow you to feel your feelings and go through the gamut of emotions that come with that. So that first step that you need to look at is trust. And that's really, really important. The next step is validation. Another thing that happens when we're children is that our parents and our caregivers and the adults in our life are there to validate us, to let us know that we're worthy, that we're valuable, regardless of what we put out. So the validation is not based on what other people get from you. The validation is just the simple fact that you exist. They're validating your existence. And when you've gone through trauma, when you've been abused, when you've been neglected, or you haven't had the greatest home life in your primary years, one of the biggest things you lack is validation. That validation or lack thereof from your caregivers is a big deal. And so you might have to start working on self-validation and learning how to look at yourself and finding the value in you. And so not based on necessarily abilities. All right. A lot of times we go to, I have this skill set, or I have this talent, or I have this degree, or I have this knowledge or skill to do a particular thing. And because of that, I'm worthy. The validation is not because you have the ability to do that. The fact that you're a human being, the fact that you're alive, the fact that you're breathing and you're here and you exist and you have the ability to love other people and you have the ability to contribute to society, just your existence is validating enough. And so that is something that's really important. You have to look to healing the lack of validation for the inner child. And that is something that is a process. It's not something that's going to be easy. It's not going to be instinctive at first. And so you're going to have to work on building it to where it now becomes an innate part of who you are, an innate part of your character. And that's a process you have to go through, seeing your own worth, being able to value yourself, and not looking for external things or external people to validate your existence. All right. So the first thing we talked about was trust. The second thing we talked about was validation. The next thing is the shock and the anger, because the reality is you're going to be shocked when you start to have clarity and more recollections about the things that happened to you. And you're also going to have anger that goes with that, especially if you're a person who's traumatized or abused or neglected in some kind of way. As an adult, when we start to try to recover the memories of what happened to us, it's shocking a lot of times to hear this information. It's shocking to know that people that were tasked to care for us and to nurture us and to help us grow would do those things to us. And so the shock and the anger you're going to have to deal with, not to project it out to other people, to process it internally about what happened and to get a grip on it. Because the reality is lashing out to other people is not going to help you. You're still going to be dealing with these issues. You could have had a neglectful parent and you can now be a parent yourself, and you can see these issues still happening as far as character traits in your parent. And you're wondering to yourself, I'm in my 40s, they're 60 plus. Why do they still have these issues at this age? They should be beyond that. It's shocking and it makes you angry. But the reality is we don't know what happened in their development. They may have had an issue that didn't allow them the capacity to develop the skills or the things that you needed from them as a parent. And so it will often sometimes give you sympathy for the caregiver to see things in a different light and be empathetic to understand that they gave you what they had. They didn't have the capacity to give you what you needed, but they gave you what you had. So once you get over the shock and the anger of what happened to you and who did it to you and the fact that it was unfair, you can move past that point of hurt. But you're going to have to process those emotions, but make sure you process it in a productive manner. So with that shock and anger, again, do not lash out, because lashing out is not going to solve anything. It's just going to add more problems on top of the things that you're trying to resolve currently. All right, so we talked about first one was dealing with trust. Second one was validation. Third one was shock and anger. The next thing is sadness. And the reality is, after you get past the initial shock and the hurt of what has happened to you, you will be sad. And the reality is you will mourn in a lot of ways the things that you feel like you lost, the things that you didn't have the capacity to gain because of the experiences, because of how you were raised, because of the situation that you went through, the trauma, whatever it was, neglect, you're going to be sad. And the inner part of you will have that child inside of you that is just sad and reaching out, wanting someone to see I'm hurting. And so you'll still be carrying around that hurt from things that happened to you 20 years ago, things that happened to you 30 years ago. And it's not something that is always in the forefront of your mind every day, but there will be situations and triggers that will happen that you will immediately go to a place where you're just wounded and you're sad because it's almost like you feel like you're transported back to those situations all over again, like it's happening currently. You're going to have to deal with the sadness. The sadness is important. Just like we tell people they have to grieve and they have to feel their emotions, the full gamut of grief and the emotions. There will be days when they're happy. There will be days when they're sad. There'll be days when they're indifferent. It'll be a roller coaster of emotions that you go through when you're grieving the loss of a loved one. You're almost in a way grieving the losses that your inner child had that was never dealt with. And so because of that, there's going to be sadness. You're going to need to deal with that. And you're going to sometimes have to sit in that sadness, feel that emotion. Don't allow people to judge you for feeling that emotion. Don't allow people to tell you that you should be over it, that you need to move on. Because the reality is, no one knows how they will react if that was their life experience, if that was what they had to live through, and they don't know how they would still be processing it as an adult. So you do need to be able to deal with the sadness. You do need to be able to deal with that loss or the losses that you had as a child, because it's an important part of the healing process that you have to go through. So first, we talked about trust. Second, we talked about validation. Third was shock and anger. And this last one was sadness. This next one is remorse. A lot of times we feel like when we're grieving a person, especially if we feel like we wish we had more time or we wish we could have done more things, there's a remorse that comes with that. And when we're grieving our inner child and we're grieving the things that we lost as a child or the experiences that took things from us emotionally or stopped us from developing things emotionally, there will be remorse there. The remorse is because you wish you could have had this. You saw other people that you grew up with that were your childhood friends, and you saw how their family and home environment was, and you wished that you could have had a household like that. You wish you could have had parents like that. You wish you would not have gone through that traumatic experience or dealt with neglect. And so there will be a feeling of remorse, and there will be those feelings that you have that's a pain that says, I wish things could have been done differently. The reality is, when you're dealing with that remorse, you're not going to be able to recover and change the life experiences that you had. You have to deal with the hand that you're dealt. But you still need to process getting over wanting things to be different. What can I learn from those life experiences? How have they shaped me to be the person I've developed into? A lot of times they shaped you into the strong, resilient person that you are. You overcame those things, and because you overcame those things, it allowed you to be stronger and build those emotional muscles to be able to withstand some things that you might not have possibly been able to deal with had you not gone through those experiences as a child. So we're kind of at the end of our 15 minutes, and I'm stopping a little bit early because I want to kind of close this out. There's one more thing on the list that I want to talk about, and I kind of want to deal with that next week. I want to do a part 2 of this, but I think it's really important to recap what we talked about. The first one was trust. All right. Second one was validation. Shock and anger was the third. Fourth was sadness. The fifth one was remorse. Next week, we're going to speak about the loneliness that you have to deal with, and I want to deal with that in a little bit more depth and detail. I hope that something that was said was helpful to start you on your journey. I know that everyone is not going to go and get therapy professionally. They won't be in a setting where they can get counseling for past issues and deal with the hurts that they're still carrying as adults. But I think that there's still a process where we have to acknowledge our hurts, and we have to, at some point in time, stop neglecting them, stop repressing these issues, and actually deal with them head on. And so that was the goal with this particular topic. So hopefully something that was said will help you. If you'd like to reach out to me and you have some further questions or you want to start a dialogue, you can catch me on social media, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. And my handle is Dr. Malaika Speaks. Malika is spelled Malaika. And my website address is malikambrown.com. And you can reach me any of those places. Let me know, even on the video when it's posted, how this has helped you, any questions that have come up with, if you want to share your story, anything that will be enlightening on this particular topic. So remember, again, we were talking about healing your inner child and dealing with trauma and neglect and emotional experiences that you dealt with as a child in your adulthood, and trying to get over them so that you can live your best life. So until next week, when we conclude this topic, we will be finishing up on talking about healing your inner child. I am Dr. Malika, and I hope you have a great and wonderful rest of your week. God bless you.